Okay, so Rings of Power episode 5 has now dropped, and throughout this video we're going to be breaking down the plot, Easter eggs, and also what we think is going to be happening in the next one. We're also going to be going over our general thoughts on the series, so make sure you stick around until the end for our review. Now we start off with Nori teaching language and the ways of the Harfoots to the stranger. Really nice detail here that he has a similar accent to them, which is what he would sound like due to learning how to talk from them. I think it's becoming more and more clear that at the very least he's a wizard due to the magical abilities that he demonstrates later on. I think due to Amazon keeping his identity a secret that he's likely Gandalf instead of one of the blue wizards who emerged during this time. The stranger learning about the cultures of the Harfoots could explain Gandalf's love for the halflings later in life, and due to their kindness, we can see why he'd gravitate towards them. He's quite a conflicted character after realizing that he's also a peril to this world. I think come the end of the season that he'll master his abilities. Nori also brings up cave trolls, which we've seen in live action in the Peter Jackson films. Now I did discuss last week how I thought he might be Elrond's father Elrond, who too gets mentioned once more in this episode. The source material had him being a character that travelled out to Valinor, and due to completing this journey he was raised up and entrusted with carrying a star across the sky. This could explain why the stranger came crashing down in a starfall, and also help to give some emotional closure to Elrond, who wants to see him again. I think it's more likely a wizard, but that's a super early theory time for your son of a bitch ass. Now from here we get a banger of a song performed by Poppy that had me nodding away and beatboxing over the top of it. Call to me, lands far away. Anyway, they make the perilous journey across the lands of Middle-earth, and we start at the Rovanian Hills before moving to Weedbrook and then the Undercliffs. The great river Anduin flowed through this area, and it actually led to Mordor, which we know as the Southlands in the show. This could explain how all the characters end up meeting each other. I'm guessing that's where the Harfoots are heading now. Now they also pass through the Grey Marshes, and due to the location of where this is on the map, I think this might end up becoming the Dead Marshes that we see in the Two Towers. It's a really nice scene about community and family, even though they'd leave you behind to die if you sat down to tie your shoelace. The stranger constantly stares at the sky, and we then pick up elsewhere to see some strange figures that I'm not really that sure on. They are clearly following the footsteps of the stranger, but whether they're good or bad remains to be seen. The leader looks like he's wanting to do an Eminem tribute act, and he scans the ground before looking around menacingly. Now potentially they might be servants of the Dark Lord who are awaiting his arrival, which could of course be the stranger. I know Sauron has become this show's Mephisto, with everyone suspecting that he's one of the characters, and will the real Sauron please stand up? Now these characters could also be his followers that are aware of an Istari arrival, and they might want to take him out before he masters his powers. Though they appear in white, I think the show is telling us in the shorthand that they're bad, which is why they stand over the rocks similar to how the wolf appeared in episode 1. From here we cut to Adar staring up at the sun in the sky. Due to living with orcs for so long, it's unlikely that he would have spent much time in its light, and he promises to destroy it, which is metaphorically about him embracing the darkness. At least we learn he's not Sauron come the end, and I think he wants to blanket the land in darkness, which the fires of Mount Doom would allow him to do. We'll also talk later on about what we think the blade is a key to, but he's clearly trying to mimic the deeds of Morgoth. As we saw in episode 1, he destroyed the two trees out in Valinor, which at the time were what gave light to the world. These were poisoned by the giant spider Ungoliant, and they were destroyed, which is when the elves rose up. Adar likely wants to create darkness throughout Middle-earth, and this would of course allow for his orcs to roam free without being restricted to the shadows. I love the character's design, and as many of you pointed out, his armour is full of river shapes, calling back to his conversation last week about Beleriand. I think he spent a lot of time along rivers like this, but then he was captured by Sauron and possibly tortured. We see how he later reacts to the Dark Lord being brought up, and potentially he was corrupted, and deep down hates what he's become. Still, he serves as Sauron, who was known for torturing those he captured in an attempt to make them become one of his subscribers, who also like the videos, might I just add. Now Bronwyn announces the deal that Adar has offered them, and some of the men end up going to him in an attempt to join his forces. This includes Waldreg, who we know had the blade buried beneath his barn. The men of course once swore allegiance to Morgoth, and he sees it as a way to survive the oncoming slaughter. Weirdly, he doesn't take Theo with him, and my guess is that the blade is now bound to him, which is why he can't just take it as a gift. Might just be some bad writing, but either way, from here we go to Numenor. I was kinda hoping we'd skip the 10 days that they talked about last week, but we get it all filled in, and honestly, I don't think it progresses the plot that much. We watch them loading up the ships and can see a horse being lowered in, which explains how they'll have them when they arrive on Middle-earth. The majority of these scenes are centered around Valindiel and his crew training, whilst Isildur desperately tries to get on board. His father wants him to earn his place, and he's very much aware that his position could be a way to give his son a shortcut to the top. He doesn't want to do this though, and rejects his request to skip the line like Phil and Holly. This very much sets up how Isildur just wants power without really working for it, and it explains why he doesn't throw away the ring. This will give him the power he craves without really having to earn it, and the pieces are all slowly starting to slot into place. Valindiel is also a character whose name might have roots in the Lord of the Rings mythology. Valindiel was the youngest of Isildur's 4 sons, and he clearly named him after the friend who put him through his paces. Aerion cries out of Pharazôn so that he can put a stop to things, and eventually Kemen goes out to destroy one of the boats. Though last week I said I thought he might be working for his father to gain her trust, I actually think that he genuinely cares for her. In the books, Pharazôn mounts a coup to take over the kingdom, and we are slowly seeing the pieces of this fall into place. He might even have Halbrand as an insider, which is how we see him working as a blacksmith. We learn that he earned his crest last week after he handed Galadriel over, and he's clearly just after his own best interests. He's called before the council of Galadriel, Miriel, and Pharazôn, and plots out the enemy's plan. This includes pointing out the Tower of Ostrith, which is where Arondir and co are currently holed up. Halbrand is told that he'll be leading a fellowship, and they said it. He's very much a reluctant king, similar to Aragorn, and though it's thought that he could be Sauron, I just don't see it. I've had a lot of conversations with Nerd of the Rings about this, and he thinks that the conversation about controlling your enemies and whispering in Pharazôn's ear pointed it towards it being him. Pharazôn in the books is manipulated by the Dark Lord in attempting to steal a kingdom, and he's tempted with the secrets of eternal life. However, I think that Halbrand is more likely going to become a king that's corrupted into becoming a Nazgul, and on the opposite side of this, Elendil will rise up. Also, Nerd of the Rings did a great live stream with director Wayne Yip, who confirmed that the sword we saw last week was indeed Narsil. I theorised it was, and they held on it for so long, I was like, that's a bloody perfect thumbnail image. Was literally filmed like it was for YouTubers, and the director also said that the background image was Beren and Luthien. This was the moment that Beren pried the Silmaril from Morgoth's crown, and it is a big moment in the source material. Now Galadriel wants to use Halbrand to unite the people in the south, but he sees he's being used like he used her. Back with the caravan, Wolf tracks once more signal danger, and this is of course a callback to the start of episode 1. This time there's far more though, and we see that the landscape is being slowly corrupted with the forest being bare. The Dark Lord is poisoning the trees, which we also see reflected in Lindon later on. This is something that also appeared in an unexpected journey when we saw how Radagast the Brown's home was being corrupted due to the Dark Lord rising up. The wolves end up attacking, but the stranger bests them using magic. We see how he can control many elements including the earth, but the use of this magic always exacts a toll. Whether it's the fireflies dying, Largo's foot, his arm looking like it's from Requiem for a Dream, or the water turning to ice, it all comes with a cost. This is something that we've seen in The Witcher, with all magic taking some form of life. I feel like he will end up gaining a staff, which will probably allow him to properly yield it. Elsewhere we watch Galadriel putting the soldiers through their paces, but sadly I kind of felt this training scene was a bit pointless. If they just showed up in Middle-earth being able to do all this stuff, then I don't think that anyone would have minded. We have just 3 episodes left, so spending time on things like this when we're not really getting anywhere felt like a bit of a waste of time to me. Now it is well choreographed with it almost being like a dance, but I'd love to see fights like this against the orcs, rather than them just being used in Numenor. Bloody Numenor, never gonna leave it. Now Valindiel manages to get a cut in, so he's promoted to lieutenant, and Halbrand and Isildur are both swept up in the action. Kemen wants Pharazôn to try and stop the potential war with his people, but the former of course knows that Miriel will be out of the kingdom, and with the king too weak to stop him, he'll be able to seize control. We cut immediately to the king, and he warns his daughter not to go to Middle-earth, foreshadowing the darkness that's about to befall the kingdom. Now after the stranger puts Nori on ice, we jump to a dinner party between the elves and dwarves. Haven't mentioned it so far, but the dwarven gods that wear face masks are similar to the ones from the First Age who had this over them to stand immense heat. It was even capable of blocking dragon fire, and is likely for some of the furnaces and also general attacks. Gil-galad comments on said furnaces, and also mentions the burning eyes of Orwell, possibly foreshadowing the burning eyes of Sauron. Durin tricks them into showing some respect by pretending the dinner table is a sacred stone, and this kills off the questions quicker than ones about Prince Andrew when some royal correspondent says it's not the time or place. Later on, Durin asks for the news to be given to him raw, which reminded me of Gollum talking about fish in the Two Towers. That night, Gil-galad gets Elrond to recount the story of the lost Silmarils, which we learn were hidden within a tree. Fëanor created the Silmarils, and they contain some of the light of the two trees that we saw in episode 1. It's believed in the legends that an elven warrior attempted to protect them against a Balrog, and when lightning struck the tree, a power was created within the rock. He says Mithril contains the light of the Silmarils, and tells Elrond about the corruption laying waste to the land. At this point, I believe we see a water basin similar to the Mirror of Galadriel, which allows those who look into it to see potential future events. The full backstory of it is unknown, and similar to Narsil, it might be an Easter egg just laying around in the background. He talks about how the light is fading, and that the elves are dying out. The corruption by Morgoth did ravage the earth, which is why they fought to remain behind to protect Middle-earth. In the end, they left for Valinor, which was no longer a physical part of Arda, aka the earth. It was beyond the spheres of it, and it's where the elves returned to in the end. The elves want to gain vast quantities of mithril, as the light of the Silmarils will saturate them in a way that stops them from decaying, but it'll likely cause a lot of conflict with the dwarves. I think the two sides greedily digging so deep will be what on earth's a Balrog, and we potentially even heard the roar of one last week during the cave collapse scene. We get a speech about Elrond's dad, and this reminded me a lot of the one from Fellowship, where Gandalf talks about how all people who face adversity wish it wasn't them. Next we cut to Numenor, and see what I believe is a statue of Elendil. Here we see his hands stretched out, almost in a welcoming way, which shows how the men used to welcome all who'd come into the kingdom. The statues are similar to the Argonath, however, the hands for those were put up in a way that almost said stop. It shows how the mind state of the men changed over time, and that they went from initially being welcoming to wanting to keep themselves to themselves. We can see a star shining bright in the sky, which may be the one that Elendil carries. The gem on his forehead lights up similar to it, so scrap the entire part of my video about the stranger being him. Now moving on, the Numenorians are partying like it's 1999 BC, I don't know, and Isildur comes back grovelling in what I think might even be the same alley used for the fight against Halbrand. After he gets his back alley beatings, it's still not forgiven, and thus he tries to be a stowaway on the ship. There's some mention of him finding something one day that he'll be prepared to sacrifice everything for, which no prizes for guessing what that is. Kemen climbs aboard the boat to do some arson, which is where the pair duke it out. This causes the ship to set on fire, and he pulls his potential future brother-in-law in. The pair end up covering for each other, and I wonder if this debt will come back around in the future with them both operating in the political structures. That night, Galadriel apologizes to Halbrand for using him, and though her character is getting online for being a Karen, I do think that's the whole point. She's completely unlikable, always asking to see the manager, and keeps telling people that they have to help her fight Sauron. I think the series is very much about her learning that's a bad way to go on, and that she gets much further by actually trying to work with people instead of against them. Halbrand hints that he had to do some bad things to get by, and he might have even worked with Adar at some point in the past. His speech about how he did what he had to survive is interwoven with the men pledging their allegiance, and therefore I think it's kind of tying in with that. Now he might have even had to kill people, and if he's not Theo's father, then potentially he's the one who made him disappear. This would cause issues with him and Bronwyn, and he clearly ran away for a reason. Great speech by Galadriel about how vengeance has consumed her, but it comes a bit late at the 50-minute mark, and she gives Halbrand back his true family crest of the kings, which he ends up taking in the morning. Waldreg has to cut the character I f***ing hate, and hey, give me the knife, I'll f***ing do it, I f***ing hate the Anyway, back at the tower, Theo shows Arondir the blade, and Arondir shows one of the wall murals built by the men that swore loyalty to the Dark Lord. This clearly shows the blade in it, and Arondir describes it as a key. In episode 1, we heard lots of talk about how the orcs were experimenting with how to access the unseen world, which I think is where Sauron is likely hidden out. The blade will be able to pull him out from that, and that's likely why the orcs are after it. With the incoming slaughter, I think it's gonna end up being used as a weapon to stop them, and if it's also a Morgul blade, then it could cause some real devastation. I also think they're gonna bring the tower crashing down on the orcs next week, as they have a light bulb moment when they talk about how it will fall, but let me know below exactly what you think. The beacon on it is lit up almost like a waypoint, and the orcs all storm towards it. Durin enjoys having the fate of all the elves in his hand, but in the end he agrees to hand over the mithril. They're gonna have to dig deeper to get more, and as we know, Khazad-dûm ends up falling, so everything is kinda lining up for us to see that play out. He returns home with his table for Disa, and we end with them finally heading out to Middle-earth. Halbrand wears the classic brown armor of his people, and I got lots of flashes of the riders of Rohan in the helmet design, which comes out the top like it's almost a ponytail. Ponytail because it's related to horses, but either way, it's a really great way to end the episode. And I was talking about this with Greg from Real Rejects, and he was saying that it's basically the streaming show effect where they end on their best stuff to try and make you forget how slow paced the other things were. Sadly, I agree with him, and I think they could have started the episode like this without us really losing a beat. In the end, Galadriel shows up rocking her armor, and we know from the trailers that she's going to be wearing this a lot. Now that kind of segues into my next part of the video, which is the review. Unfortunately, this felt a bit like a filler episode to me for at least the first 50 minutes. Though it picked up at the end, there wasn't really that much that got me on board. I think a lot of this stuff could have been condensed. In a time when I was hoping that the series would pick up, we're not much further forward than we were last week. I was really thinking that after they announced the voyage at the end of the last time that we'd hit the ships, but we focus on things like the training of the crew, and I think everyone would have been completely fine if they just arrived in Middle-earth and had the skills that they learned here. I know a lot of people are fine with the show taking its time, but for episodes that cost $60 to $70 million, I am wondering if they could have spent the budget on things beyond the costumes and set. I think we really need some big action scenes to break up the dialogue, and whilst I know people will be rolling their eyes and thinking that I'm an idiot with a short attention span, it would add some dynamics to the series. I think there's not really been all that much character development in the 5 hours either, and after lots of highs and lows in the first 2 episodes, Galadriel to me has been almost the same in every single scene since. We've had a couple of bursts here and there where she realises she's just set on vengeance, but most of the time, she's just repeating what's already been established. Isildur is the same as well, and as one of the most interesting characters during this time. Sadly, they just have him constantly arguing about his duty with his dad, rather than actually putting him in situations where he's gonna need to make very tough decisions. I think the audience really needs to care about what's going to happen with him, and I want it to feel like our hearts are ripped out when we see how he's corrupted by the ring. I kind of feel the series also needs a MacGuffin beyond the blade, and for a show called Rings of Power, we still haven't had them. Lord of the Rings of course had the ring and the quest centre around that. The Hobbit trilogy was about going to the mountain and taking it back, but I'm still not sure what this series is really focused on. Though they're obviously going to be going to Sauron, the plots don't really feel all that connected yet, and we're just kind of watching everyone travel to the Southlands to obviously meet up, but they don't know why. Now I am very torn on whether to keep covering this, and I might just miss episodes 6 and 7 and then come out with a big ending explained video for the finale. I think it was wrong dropping this at the same time as House of the Dragon, as you instantly pit them against each other, and that feels far more of an interesting show to me. And there are good bits in this, and I do try and fill my reviews with positives too. Though I initially thought the Harfoots stuff was a little slow, they're ironically the ones making headway in this episode. Love the mystery surrounding the stranger, and the little breadcrumbs that they're leaving for us as to what's going on with him. There's those weird creepy followers too, and I think the stuff with Elrond and Durin also helps to elevate the show. Lastly is Adar, who I think is a great villain, and considering he's a new creation, it's a wonder that the other newbies aren't this well written. The Arondir, Bronwyn and Theo stuff also had some good scenes, but overall it feels very imbalanced. Now I am happy that they're finally getting out of Numenor, and I'm hopeful next week will raise things up once the pieces start falling into place. Hopefully we'll get to see the scope and scale of this series used for more than just talking, and I'm hoping that the next 3 episodes knock it out of the park. So overall summary, slow start that got good towards the end, but it needs to have more of these moments early on next week, especially if the run times are getting longer. It puts the mid in Middle-earth for me, and though I don't think it's as bad as everyone else is saying, I feel like there's a lot of missed potential here. Obviously though, I'd love to hear your thoughts. If you agree, if you disagree, it's all fine. Don't mind whatever you say. You guys have your own opinions, and that's totally cool. So yeah, leave them below in the comments, and as a thank you, you'll get entered into a competition where we're giving away 3 copies of Thor Love and Thunder on the 15th of October. All you have to do to be on the chance of winning is like the video, make sure you subscribe with notifications on, and drop a comment below with your thoughts on the episode. We pick the comments at random at the end of the month, and the winners of the last one are on screen right now, so if that's you, then message me on Twitter at HeavySpoilers. If you want something else to watch, then make sure you check out our breakdown of House of the Dragon, which will be linked on screen right now. We've gone over everything in the latest episode, had a blast with it, so definitely head over there right after this. By the way, thanks for sitting through the video. I've been Paul, I'll see you next time. Take care, peace.